Let's join our next guest, John David Ebert, who's the author of The New Media Invasion, Digital Technologies and the Worlds They Unmake. John, are you with us?
I am indeed, yes.
Good to talk to you.
Likewise.
And tell us a little bit about your book and your own scholarship. You're a very wide-ranging scholar. You're a mythologist, a cultural commentator. And just give us an idea about what the book is about, because we're here with Nada, who's grown up with social media as a part of her life and constant user of it.
Yes.
So what's she missing out on? What worlds have been unmade by social media?
Well, the idea occurred to me. Neil Postman always used to talk about how with every new technology that comes along, what often gets overlooked, I mean, the positive side of it, the benefits are always very evident, and they don't need much discussion because they're so evident. But what we tend to miss is the shadow side of the new technologies. Every new technology that comes along undoes some previous way of life. So we're always giving things up as we're constantly moving forward on this progression of technology and new things coming about. So I thought that, it occurred to me one day I did a Google search and I noticed that Tower Records had disappeared overnight.
That's
and
right.
That took me completely by surprise.
Virgin Megastore,
I had noticed,
too.
Of course, bookstores closing already, and it began to occur to me that the Internet was sort of sucking these things out of three-dimensional physical space and pulling them into the world of the Internet, into the digital world, and so that in direct proportion to the rise and differentiation of the Internet, at the same time, this whole world, this Gutenbergian world of media and the media explosion that attended it, and that as the 20th century developed decade by decade, we got more and more and more media. But now it seems like with the rise of the Internet, all this other media is being undone. We're losing bookstores, we're losing record stores, newspapers are folding up and going online, magazines are folding up. So it seems like we're losing a whole way of life. The world that I grew up with as a child is disappearing right in front of my eyes. And that seemed to me like something worth writing about, something alarming enough to devote an entire book to. So that was the initial inspiration for the book.
Yes, it's a really fascinating book. I was wondering if you could give us some more examples maybe of how the disappearance of bookstores and the rise of Amazon.com, how do you read that from your unique perspective?
Well, I see it as a kind of a media extinction event. Whereas, in McLuhan's generation, McLuhan was the big media scholar back in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, and he was a traditional English...
The medium is the message, and
exactly.
The global village.
Yep, and in his
ideas.
day, he was going through the final stages of the sort of Cambrian explosion of media forms. And so when you read books by him like Understanding Media, you get all these different chapters on different forms of media like comic books and records and
the bicycle.
Yeah, everything.
I love that chapter.
And so in his time, this was a Cambrian explosion, and he was living through the final phases of it. And the thing that he noticed about it was, of course, the rise of electric technologies and how electric technologies, particularly after World War II, changed and reconfigured the entire media landscape and began melting down the linear, first one thing, then another linear logic of the Gutenbergian world that came in with the printing press in the 15th century. And so he was tracking that. But then by the time you get to the end of the 20th century, along about 1995, when the Internet began to be turned over to the public sector, at about that time, then we start seeing this extinction event where the Internet sort of almost like a meteor crashes into the landscape, and suddenly all of these culture forms that have been around, in some cases for decades, in some cases, as with the printed book, for centuries, have started to disappear. So now we have, the Kindle replacing the book, and we have, as I remarked before, the disappearance of record stores and bookstores. And then, it's becoming more and more difficult for publishers to publish intellectual discourse because they have all these financial pressures on them. So they sort of turn all that over to the academic world. And the kind of environment, the kind of media ecological environment that enabled a McLuhan or somebody of that nature to flourish is basically gone. So these media are disappearing, and it's an extinction event, and it's alarming. It's cause for alarm. So
now, you had a very clever analogy in your book to the sort of flows that have characterized the rise of Amazon and the ambitions of its founder as being sort of transcendental. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, and it's aptly named. The Amazon is named after a river because it's a flowing realm of continual information and books, and Jeff Bezos, of course, being the founder of it. And Bezos he had grown up wanting to participate in the space age. He had dreamed about becoming one of the first people to go into outer space, one of the first public individuals to go into outer space. And I think that is still one of his goals. He wants to move into that world. And it's a kind of, the moment you want to get away from the Earth, it's a kind of replay of the old Gnostic Neoplatonic myth of the soul's ascent from the body. Excuse me, the soul's ascent from the body to get into outer space and to turn and look back at the world of wet biology, the messy world of matter, which is very difficult to control because it's self-organizing and it does its own thing, and it doesn't fit very well with the Platonism of imposing geometrical equations on it and escaping into a pure realm of mathematics where the soul beholds the pure light of the mathematical forms upon which the physical world is structured. And in a way, the whole space program replays that. It's a sort of technologized replay of the ancient myth of the soul's flight from the body. The earliest origins of that, of course, are in shamanism, where the shaman goes into a trance state and assumes the astral body shape of a bird and leaves his body and goes out, and he can look down at the earth and see where all the animal herds have gone and so forth, so he can always direct the tribe to finding new forms of sustenance. That's the oldest form of that. Mm-hmm. And so now we're sending ships into orbit. We've been doing this since the Apollo programs, and it is a form of Platonism. It is a form of escaping from the Earth in order to get a better angle on controlling it, on manipulating it, and capturing it into these flows. And Bezos with Amazon is doing something similar in a transcendentalist way by taking the printed word and putting it into the flows of cyberspace, the telematic society, the realm of pure decoded flows where information is constantly divorced from the material substrate. It's no longer incarnated in physical matter like paper, wood, earthly materials, and now it's in this sort of Neoplatonic silicon equivalent, the cyberspace where the mind is divorced from matter, being is divorced from becoming. And again, it furthers this technological process of moving into this transcendentalist world where we're divorced from the forms, and we believe that we have better control over matter in doing this. But it is a kind of escape. It is a kind of desire to escape from the realm of the concrete, the three-dimensional.
Now, for those of us who may not be so familiar with Plato and the allegory of the cave, or who may have just heard of that but not really know what it is, could you explain that myth and how it relates to what you're seeing happening in new media?
Yeah, the original myth you can find it in the Republic, that Plato gives as an allegory of his entire philosophy. Plato mistrusts the senses. He believes that the senses, if you rely on your five senses for knowledge, you're going to go wrong because the senses give faulty information. If you put a stick in the water, you get an optical illusion where the stick looks bent, and so you can't rely on sensory data. But he did believe that you could rely on mathematics. Mathematics is a realm of pure forms that's divorced from the material world. So he has this myth of the cave where the ideal education consists in the guy who leaves the cave. You have an audience that is bound inside of a cave looking at, there's a fire burning behind them, and it's casting shadows on the wall. This is sort of Plato's movie theater analogy. Mm-hmm. They're looking at shadows on the wall, and the one who hears the call, the one who is illuminated, leaves the tribe, goes out of the cave, and finds the sun, which is the original source of all the forms. And the sun in this allegory is the symbol of the good, the ultimate realm of forms that is the source for all the shadows. But the people inside the cave mistake the shadows on the wall for substance. They think that's the real. They think that's reality, but they're entranced by an illusion. But the one who leaves that sees what the real world is, and the real world here for Plato is the realm of mathematics and philosophical concepts that liberate the mind from the shackles of the five senses and cannot steer it astray. and that becomes the realm for for ultimate knowledge, and that, of course, becomes the founding myth of knowledge for the entire unfolding of the subsequent history of Western science. And so that's the basic myth behind this.
Uh-huh. And how does that relate to some of what we're seeing with the rise of social media, or even some of the media that McLuhan was writing about?
Well, what's happened is that the idea of the realm of Platonic forms is a realm of being, a realm that always is and never was, whereas the physical world is a realm that's a river of flow. Everything is flowing and changing, and it's temporal. It's the realm of time. But over the centuries, being, what we think of as the ultimate reality, the ultimate source for the shadow forms of the world, has changed. It's undergone a number of transformations. By the time you get to Descartes, it becomes the realm of ultimate objectivity, the realm of pure subjects beholding pure objects in Cartesian phase space. It's a three-dimensional phase space that's divorced from the physical world, and in which you can map out the trajectories of motion and so forth. But over time...
And John, just...
Yes.
For some of our listeners who may not be familiar with Descartes, you hear about the Cartesian plane, which is sort of the XY axis on which a lot of mathematics is done.
Exactly.
And of course, he's famous for the quote "cogito ergo sum," which is, I think, therefore I am, right?
Yes, that's it, exactly. So the ultimate nature of reality became mathematical, and the infinitesimal calculus came out of all this. But eventually, by the time you get to the 20th century, that realm, this sort of parallel world, which is more real than the physical world that's evident to our senses, basically dissolved and disappeared into the dust and chaos of World War II. When the dust settles and we come out of it, now we've got electronic culture, electronic technologies, we've got new gadgets, they start coming along, and they begin to replace the ultimate real. The realm of what had been being, and for Descartes had been these ultimate mathematical equations, is now an electronic parallel reality. And this parallel reality actually is a sort of, I visualize it anyway, different philosophers see it in different ways, but I see it as a two-dimensional world that is flatter than the 3D world that we inhabit, but that is a world now that signifies the ultimate reality. And it parallels this older world of the realm of Platonic forms. You're not really real in this society. You don't really signify unless you have an avatar that incarnates in this parallel electronic reality.
You're talking about a Facebook
media
profile, right?
What's that?
You're talking about a Facebook profile.
Yeah, exactly. Just to grab a random example. Exactly.
Okay.
So all the social media are now creating, democratizing the ability for the rest of the population to participate in this myth of becoming discarnate, of leaving the physical body and taking on a presence in this technologized world of ultimate reality. So that's how I connect all this together.
But isn't there a way in which you could say this isn't really such a new thing, because people have always had new ways of communicating with each other, and these Facebook profiles aren't just profiles, they aren't just masks or avatars, that there really is a person on the other end of that, and this is just the latest form of communication?
Yes and no. I mean, there's a certain naivete about that. I mean, yes, we've had, media have changed. They began, oral media were the earliest media. If you wanted to transmit knowledge, you had to sing it, basically, and remember all the poems of the tribe. Then it becomes eventually print-based, and now it's electronic. But with electronic media, something different has happened, something fundamental, which is to say that it's a digital equivalent of what previously had been this idea of discarnating the soul and loading it into a parallel world. So the realm of communication now is no longer just a realm of reading text. It's a realm of actually participating in creating a parallel self. And the celebrities of the 1950s, the great celebrities, James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, were the first to really do this. They were the pioneers that entered the realm of this creation of electric avatars. First this begins in film, and they were the first sort of, the lab rats, the canary sent into the mine to test this out, and of course it had very tragic results. So their lives are warnings to the rest of us about what can happen when the avatar that's created takes on too much of a reality. It begins to sort of leach vitality from the actual physical person's life. And so the avatar can almost become more real than the person, and we tend to mistake the avatar for the person. We worship the avatar, and we think it's the person that we're worshiping, but it isn't. So all of that is a warning for the rest of us who now, with all the social media, are participating in the democratization of the cult of the celebrity. And so, yeah, there is a person on the other end of this, but that isn't what matters in cyberspace. What matters is what appears, and that's the trick. That's the overturning of the Platonic epistemology. Whereas for Plato, what